The morning sun brushed against the Collins estate, where marble floors shone and silence echoed louder than love. In this perfect house lived a woman named Grace Williams, a black woman of 30, with a gentle smile and quiet strength that no storm could break. Every morning, she tied her hair neatly, buttoned her soft gray cardigan, and stepped into a world that never quite saw her, except for one little boy, Ethan Collins, 5 years old, curious, tender-hearted. Grace was his favorite person in the world. She read him stories before bed, fixed his breakfast just the way he liked, and hummed old gospel tunes when he was afraid of the dark. To him, she wasn't the nanny, she was comfort, safety, home. He'd wait by the window every morning, pressing his small hands to the glass until her car appeared. Then he'd run, shouting her name, eyes sparkling like sunlight on the sea. Grace would laugh softly, catching him in her arms. "My little man," she'd whisper. "You've grown again." He'd smile back and say, "You're my real mom." Those words always broke her heart, not because they hurt, but because they were true in the purest way a child could mean them. But upstairs, Helen Collins heard. Helen, his mother by blood, but never by warmth. Her beauty was polished, her manners sharp as crystal, her heart locked behind years of wealth and distance. Each time she saw her son cling to Grace, something cold stirred inside her: envy, pride, fear of being replaced by love she hadn't earned. She complained to her husband, Richard, who barely looked up from his newspaper. "She's overstepping," Helen said. Richard replied without emotion, "Fire her then." But Helen didn't. Not yet. She watched. She waited. Until one afternoon she walked into Ethan's room without knocking. The boy was sitting on the floor, crayons scattered everywhere. He didn't notice her at first. He was too focused on his drawing a picture of himself, smiling, holding Grace's hand. Above their heads, in bright red letters, he had written, "My real mom." Helen froze. The color drained from her face. Something inside her brittle and cruel snapped. That evening, she called Grace into the sitting room. Grace came quietly, wiping her hands on her apron, unaware that the life she knew was about to end. Helen stood tall by the fireplace, her voice cool as marble. "We won't be needing your services anymore," she said. "You've grown too attached." Grace blinked, caught off guard. "I'm sorry if I..." Helen cut her off. I don't need explanations. Just pack your things." For a moment, silence filled the air. Grace's eyes softened, not with anger, but sorrow. She nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Upstairs, Ethan heard voices. He ran to the stairs and saw Grace holding her small box of belongings. Panic flashed across his face. "Are you leaving?" he cried. Grace knelt down, her eyes shining through tears she refused to let fall. "I have to, sweetheart. Did I do something wrong?" She shook her head gently. "No, baby. You did everything right." He clung to her neck, sobbing into her shoulder. She stroked his hair, whispering, "You're light, Ethan. Don't let the world make you a shadow." Helen stood behind them, arms folded, face expressionless. Richard wasn't even there. Grace stood, wiped the boy's tears, and gave him one last smile, soft, eternal, broken. Then she turned and walked to the door. Her shoes made no sound on the marble floor. Outside, the sky had turned gray. Rain began to fall, slow at first, then heavier. Grace stepped into it without an umbrella, clutching her box of belongings. Inside her pocket, she felt something, a small, folded piece of paper. She stopped under a streetlight and opened it. It was the drawing, the one Ethan had made. "My real mom." Her breath caught. A tear rolled down her cheek, lost in the rain. She pressed the paper to her heart, whispering, "You'll always be my boy." Behind her, the mansion's lights glowed cold and distant, like stars too proud to warm the earth. And as Grace walked away, soaked but unbroken, the voice inside her, the one that always whispered faith, said quietly, "Love doesn't end. It waits." That night, a chapter closed in silence. But the bond between them, the unseen thread of love and trust, stayed alive, waiting for time to bring them back together. Because even when the world forgets kindness, a child never forgets who loved him first. 15 years passed like a long sigh between two heartbeats. Ethan Collins was no longer the small boy who once clung to the warmth of his nanny's hands. He had grown into a tall, confident young man, the kind who looked like he had everything, yet felt like he had nothing. His smile was polite, practiced. His voice carried calm, but never laughter. At 20, Ethan stood on the stage of his university graduation, surrounded by applause that didn't touch his heart. Cameras flashed, speeches echoed, and his parents Helen and Richard sat in the front row, immaculate and detached, like guests at someone else's celebration. When the ceremony ended, Helen approached him with her flawless grace. She handed him a small velvet box. Inside an expensive wristwatch, gold and heavy, engraved with his initials. "For you, darling," she said. A reminder of time well spent. Ethan looked at it for a long moment. Then he smiled faintly, the way one smiles at a stranger. "Thank you," he said quietly, "but the only thing I really remember from my childhood isn't time. It's people." Helen frowned, puzzled, but didn't ask. She never asked. Richard checked his phone, already distracted. Within minutes, they were gone, chauffeured away in their silent car. That night, Ethan sat alone in his dorm room. The lights were dim, the city humming beyond the window. On his desk lay his diploma, gleaming in its frame, a symbol of success that somehow felt hollow. He opened a box he hadn't touched in years. Inside were fragments of a life he barely remembered: a paper airplane, a crayon drawing, a faded photograph. In the picture, a small boy sat on the lap of a woman with gentle eyes and a smile that seemed to hold the whole world together. Grace Williams. He ran his thumb over her face, tracing the curve of her smile, and something inside him shifted. That night, he made a decision. He would find her. The search wasn't easy. The old nanny agency had closed. Phone numbers were disconnected. Addresses changed. But Ethan was relentless. Between classes and work, he spent nights on the phone, sending emails, searching through records. He talked to anyone who might remember her: former coworkers, neighbors, even a retired social worker who recalled a kind woman with beautiful hands who always brought snacks for the children. Weeks turned into months. Every lead brought him closer. Every silence made him more determined. And then, one rainy afternoon, he got an email. It was short, almost clinical. "Grace Williams currently works at a children's shelter on the east side, 47 Maple Street." He read it 3 times before the meaning sank in. Then he packed a small bag, grabbed his car keys, and drove. The city changed as he moved farther east, the glass towers giving way to narrow streets and faded brick. Finally, he stopped in front of a small building with peeling white paint and a playground behind it. Children's laughter drifted through the air, mixed with the faint smell of chalk and warm bread. He stepped out, heart pounding. Every step toward that door felt heavier and lighter at the same time. Inside, the air was soft, filled with the echo of small voices. Crayons rolled across tables, drawings covered the walls, suns, trees, smiling faces. And in the middle of it all, arranging art supplies for a group of children, stood a woman. Grace. Her hair had a few silver strands now. Fine lines traced her cheeks, not of age, but of laughter and kindness. She wore a simple gray cardigan and dark jeans, her movements calm, patient, steady. The same rhythm he remembered from long ago. For a moment, Ethan couldn't move. His throat tightened. The world seemed to narrow to that one image, the woman who had once been his safe place, standing in the middle of a world she had built out of love. He didn't need to say her name. She turned, as if feeling his presence. Their eyes met. Her lips parted slightly. The years between them disappeared. "Ethan," she whispered. He nodded, his voice caught somewhere between breath and tears. "It's me." The children looked up, curious, but she didn't notice. She walked toward him slowly, her hands trembling, her eyes glistening with recognition and disbelief. "You grew up," she said softly, almost laughing through her tears. "And you're still the same," he replied, his voice shaking. There was silence, the kind that holds 1,000 unspoken words. For 15 years, she had wondered if he remembered her. For 15 years, he had carried her voice in the quiet corners of his heart. And now, standing face to face, both of them understood something simple and profound. That love, once planted, never truly fades. Grace reached out, hesitating for a moment, as if afraid he might disappear. Then she touched his cheek, and for the first time in years, Ethan felt something he hadn't known. He missed home. He smiled through the blur of tears. I never got to say thank you. She shook her head gently. You just did. Behind them, a child laughed. The sound filled the room like sunlight breaking through clouds. Grace smiled, her hand still resting on his arm. In that small, worn-out shelter, time seemed to stop. The years, the distance, the pain, all of it fell away. There was only the boy she had once loved like her own, and the woman who had never stopped loving him back. It wasn't reunion by fate. It was the return of something purer, trust, remembered and reborn. The air outside the orphanage is calm, touched by the golden warmth of the late afternoon sun. Children's laughter echoes from the yard, soft, bright, unguarded. On an old wooden bench, two people sit side by side, a lifetime between them. Grace and Ethan. They don't speak at first. The silence carries everything words cannot. Years of distance, of wondering, of what-ifs, all resting between them like fragile glass. Ethan looks down at his hands. They tremble slightly, not from nerves, but from the weight of memory. Grace's hands rest gently over his, steady, warm, familiar, the same comfort that once chased away his childhood fears. He exhales, a quiet breath that carries 15 years of longing. I tried to move on, he begins softly, but it always felt like something was missing. She listens, eyes calm, the corners crinkled with kindness. He continues, voice breaking slightly, when you left, I didn't understand. I thought maybe I did something wrong. Maybe I wasn't enough. Grace shakes her head, slow, gentle. You were always enough, Ethan. You just lived in a world that didn't know how to see love when it wasn't dressed in diamonds. He swallows hard. His gaze turns toward the playground, where a few small children chase each other in circles. Their laughter brings back echoes his laughter, once just as free, once held in these same arms. He smiles through tears. You taught me how to be kind when the world wasn't, how to listen, how to care. He pauses, voice trembling. You were home, Grace, and I want you to know you still are. Her eyes glisten, but her voice remains steady. Home isn't a place, Ethan. It's the people we carry with us. You carried me even when you didn't know it. He nods, wiping at his face with a small laugh that's half sob. Guess I did. Every good thing I've done. It started with something you taught me. She tilts her head, that same soft smile from so many years ago. Then maybe I didn't leave you after all. The children call out from the yard, pulling them both from their silence. Miss Grace, come play. Grace chuckles and waves them off, but Ethan rises first. Come on, he says, offering his hand. She hesitates, then takes it, and together, they walk toward the laughter. In the playroom, small hands tug at his sleeves, giggling, curious. He kneels down, helping one little girl build a tower of blocks. Another child clings to his arm. Within minutes, he's surrounded, laughing, listening, alive. Grace watches from the doorway. There's light in her eyes, soft, proud, unspoken. This boy she once held as a frightened child is now a man who knows how to hold others. He has her gentleness, her patience, her way of making people feel safe. And in that moment, she realizes something quietly beautiful. The love she gave didn't end. It grew. The sun dips lower, painting the room in gold. Children's laughter fades into hums of bedtime songs. Grace sits again on the bench outside, watching through the window. Ethan steps out a moment later, smiling. They don't tire easily, he says with a grin. Neither did you, she replies. He sits beside her again, the same place where they began the day. This time, the silence is peaceful. No distance, no guilt. Just warmth. Grace speaks first, her voice soft, carried by evening air. You found your way, Ethan. You grew into the kind of man I always hoped you'd be. He looks at her, glimmering. Because you showed me what love looks like. She nods, her gaze fixed on the fading light. Then my job is done. A long pause. Then he says quietly, no, it's only just begun. He turns toward her, smiling, a tear slipping free. You're still teaching me, even now. Her lips curve into a tender smile, the kind that could light a whole room. And then she whispers, almost to herself, now you're the light, Ethan, and the world will never make you a shadow again. They sit there as the sky turns to soft twilight, a moment suspended between past and future. The laughter of children drifts on the wind like a song, and for the first time in a long time, both of them feel completely at peace. Because home isn't the house you grew up in. It isn't walls or doors or names on mailboxes. Home is a heartbeat that remembers you, a voice that taught you how to love when no one else did. As the final light fades, the voiceover closes softly, almost like a lullaby. True family isn't the one that gives you life. It's the one that teaches you how to live it.